be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
The angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And coming to her, he said, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." But she was greatly troubled at what was said and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. Then the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give him the throne of David his father, and he will rule over the house of Jacob forever. And of his kingdom there will be no end." But Mary said to the angel, "How can this be, since I have had no relations with a man?" And the angel said to her in reply, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. And behold, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age. And this is the 6th month for her who was called barren. For nothing will be impossible for God." Mary said, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word." Then the angel departed from her. The Gospel of the Lord. So a lot of people get confused on this feast of the Immaculate Conception, especially because it's during Advent, when we're about to celebrate the birth of Jesus. And a lot of people think that this feast is about the Immaculate Conception of Jesus within the womb of Mary, but it's not that. It's actually, it celebrates the conception of Mary in the womb of her mom, which is where by tradition is called Anne. And so it basically celebrates that she was conceived without sin, so that she was this perfect receptacle for the Son of God. One of the things, when I think of Mary all the time, I look at that statue. She's really pretty. All of her clothes are nice, right? It's she doesn't look poor. She doesn't look pregnant. But it's gospel according to Kevin. I think we've cleaned up Mary too much. And what I like to think is about the reality of Mary and what it must have been like for her as the Mother of God. Our gospel itself said she was troubled. One of my favorite statues of Mary, has anybody ever been to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C.? How many have been there? So quite a few people have been there. I used to spend hours in there because the shrine sits on the campus of Catholic University where I got my graduate degree. So I would go in there a lot to pray. I didn't particularly like the upper church with that evil-looking Jesus. If you don't, Google Immaculate Conception and look at that big mosaic. I mean, he looks like a devil. He really does. He's got these like flames shooting out of his head and this mean look on his face. I never liked the upper church, but the lower church, I loved the lower church of the Immaculate Conception. Very, very simple, very stark, stone, beautifully done. But in the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, because it is the Catholic national shrine of Mary. It has all these different side chapels, upstairs and downstairs, with various images of Mary from various cultures. And I love that concept, that different cultures, and it kind of speaks to the melting pot that we are in the United States and how each culture has their picture of Mary. But one of the statues, which was my favorite, is if you walk in the front door of the upper church, and in the vestibule, if you look to your left, there is a statue, a very modern statue of Mary. I don't know if any of you who have been there have saw it, but I love it because it shows Mary sitting on a chair, depicted as a young woman, and she's bouncing Jesus. It looks like she's bouncing Jesus, who's like in a diaper, and she's just kind of holding him on her knee, bouncing him, and Jesus is just like this little baby reaching out, like babies do. And the first time I saw that, I was just absolutely mesmerized by that statue, because to me, it humanized Jesus, and it humanized Mary. It made her look like she probably looked, and how Jesus probably looked, and how moms are with their little babies, and how little babies can get happy, and they just want to reach out, and it's like Jesus is just reaching out to touch humanity. And I love that statue because I think it speaks to the reality of who Mary was. Our gospel itself says she was troubled, when the angel, Mary went through a lot in her life, and I think we whitewash her experience, but she was troubled. She was pained. She was embarrassed. She was frightened because, of course, the law was that she would be stoned to death if she was found to be with child prior to marriage, which she was. She went through a lot in her life with Jesus. I'm sure having Jesus wasn't the easiest child to have in the world. And I'm sure she went through a lot of painful moments in her life as he grew and he started preaching and he started saying some of the things that he did. I can imagine her in the house sometimes going, "Oy vey, he said that." I can imagine him coming home and her looking at him and going, "What are you thinking?" When he would challenge the religious leaders and all this other stuff. But every time, in the end, she opened herself completely to God's will. And she said, "Your will be done." You know what? I can't figure it out. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I'm going to trust. You ever feel that way? I'm not quite sure where I'm going. I'm not quite sure what's happening. I'm not quite sure what the future's going to hold, but I'm going to trust that God has my best interest in mind, and I'm going to keep my heart and my mind open and just put one foot in front of the other. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's what I love about Mary. My favorite title for Mary is what the Greeks have given for her. The Greek Orthodox churches call Mary Theotokos, which means God-bearer. And I love that. That's my favorite title of Mary. She is the one who literally bore God to the world. And we, as followers of Christ, and I really believe that in the Catholic tradition, Mary really symbolizes the feminine dimensions of God, really. I mean, she kind of symbolizes that dimension of God. I remember as a little kid, it was what I felt when I prayed to God the Father was a little different when I prayed to God the Mother. Did any cradle Catholics ever feel that? It's like I felt a tenderness in my heart when I would pray to Mary. And I still do, and I love that. But we, as followers of Jesus, are called to do the same. We are called to be Theotokos. We are called to be God-bearers through our kindness and compassion, our forgiveness and our generosity and caring. And society so deeply needs these qualities, does it not? Increasingly so. Society deeply needs these qualities. Society desperately needs a new birth of Christ in our midst. And you and I are called to be part of that birth as we go forth from these doors. We're called to be part of that. How many of you were here for Harriet Pickens' celebration of life on Tuesday? A few of you. Indulge me a little bit as I say some things about Harriet. We celebrated one a member of our community that, how many knew Harriet? Lots of us knew Harriet. Lots of us know Harry Pickens, her son. Well, Tuesday we celebrated her in a beautiful way. We had testimonies from people. We had, Harry is a great musician, so he had singers here, and he played, and Harriet herself, Harry recorded like hundreds of hours of Harriet telling her goofy stories. And Harriet actually spoke to us herself at her own memorial service, and we played 3 of those stories, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful celebration. But, when I think of a woman who is much like Mary, who we celebrate today, when I think of a woman who reflects God, Harriet was one of those women who really reflected God. The Lord was with her, and she opened herself to the presence of God, to bear Christ, to bear God to the world. And she did that in her accepting nature, her caring for people, her working with underprivileged students for most of her life. And in the end, towards the end of her life, in the past couple of years, when she had little to give, she would go to homeless shelters in Louisville. And she would go to the homeless, not only in the shelters, but on the streets, and simply hug them. And she would say, "I love you." And somebody told a story on Tuesday about her that she once went to Wayside Christian Mission to do her hugging ministry, as she called it. And some guy was not allowed in to, I guess he was a rabble-rouser, and so they kicked him out of Wayside, but he was hanging out in front. Well, Harriet didn't let that deter her from going up to him, and she went up to him, and she was like, "Can I give you a hug?" And he stood up, smelly, dirty, and she just hugged him and held him. And as she held him, she whispered in his ear, "I love you." And the guy started crying. And he said, "Oh my God, no one has ever told me that in my entire life." And she started crying. And they just held each other. And she said to him, "By hugging you, my heart is beating close to your heart. And it means that we are one. And please know that in my heart beating next to yours, that you are loved." It was a profound experience for that man that I don't think she ever saw again. It was a profound experience for her. And certainly, I am challenged by her example. Harriet and I became really good friends over the years. And we first bonded over light bulbs. We hoarded light bulbs, incandescent light bulbs, the bad ones. We both, I don't know what it was, we got talking about light bulbs early on in our relationship, and I said, "Harriet, don't you hate those new fandangled light bulbs? They look, I feel like I was sitting up in a classroom, because they're fluorescent." Gratefully, the LEDs and all that other stuff are getting better. They're getting warmer hues. But she was like, "Oh my God, I thought I'd never meet somebody that thought the same thing." And she was an artist as well. She goes, "Those new fandangled light bulbs, they just don't do it. The incandescent light bulbs are warm, and they have a warm light, and they really bring out color." And I said, "You got it. You got it." So that Christmas, she wrote me a long letter saying how appreciative she was of our Rabuni community and of her friendship with me. And there was a little bag, a little gift bag, and I reached into the gift bag, and there was one incandescent light bulb. I love that. I love that. And so Harriet's ashes were on the altar, and so I placed an incandescent light bulb next to her ashes. And I thought, what an apt symbol for a woman who shined brightly in her life and who cast a warm glow on everyone that she met. Wouldn't that be great if we did the same thing? I'm challenged by that to do the same thing, and I am certainly imperfect, but she is an example for me. I want to ask you I want to ask a favor of you. You may think I'm crazy. I probably already do. I want you to pretend there's a big Christmas tree right here. Okay? Big Christmas tree. Think of the one you have at home. When I was a kid, I used to love laying under the Christmas tree. Did anybody else do that? I used to love laying under the Christmas tree. It seemed like for hours. And I had my special ornaments that I would hide deep inside the Christmas tree, and I would make sure that they were lit and stuff like that. But I would lay there and I would think of Christmas, and I would think of Santa Claus, and I would think of the gifts, and I would think of Jesus, and I would just think of how beautiful those warm lights were. Take some time this week and be a kid again. If your Christmas tree is up, go home and lay under it. Go home and lay under it for a while. And just bask in that warm light. And kind of lay there and take some time to reflect. For me, as a kid, my mind was just like, it would just go, and I would relax. It was almost like a contemplative moment as a kid. So maybe we can all be a kid this week and take some time and lay under the Christmas tree for a while and just think of how we can shine our light and how we can shine our warmth with those that we come in contact with.